Hey everyone, Dave here with another Blu-ray DVD collection update / haul video. This is the first one for the month of February 2022. There will be a second video that I'll be uploading next week, but in this one right here, we'll be taking a look at one of the latest waves from Viavision's Imprint label. I believe it's the 12th wave. I'm losing track of them at the moment, but I think it's the 12th one. We'll also be taking a look at the January releases from Umbrella Entertainment. There's a ton to take a look at here, so let's get into it. Okay, so as I said, there will be a second extra video up on the channel next week. In that one, we're going to be covering the latest releases from Random Space Media and Kicks.com.au, as well as a whole bunch of stuff that I've recently picked up in a number of JB Hi-Fi sales. Very, very exciting stuff. So if you want to check out all of that, that video will be up next week. But for now, we are going to be once again taking a look at the January releases from Imprint and Umbrella Entertainment. So let's kick it off with the brand new wave. I think this is the 12th wave of Imprint. First up, we have got Lady in a Cage, starring Olivia de Havilland and James Caan, and directed by Walter Grauman. Lady in a Cage has recently been released on the US and Canadian market by Shout Factory. Alone in her residence over a sweltering holiday weekend, a widow is accidentally trapped in her home elevator during a power failure. Her meticulous, well-organised world is shattered as the elevator, stalled 9 feet above the floor, becomes a claustrophobic torture chamber, a cage. This edition is loaded with a whole bunch of special features, including a new audio commentary by film critics Kim Newman and Barry Forshaw, another new audio commentary by film critic Kat Allinger, a new video essay by Chris O'Neill, and a theatrical trailer. I really, really love Olivia de Havilland. I thought she was an absolutely wonderful actress. And James Caan, gotta love a James Caan movie. He's just awesome. This is his very first movie ever, actually. So I was excited to go into this one. Unfortunately, Lady in the Cage is an incredibly intense, confronting, and quite frankly, disturbing film. Particularly for a movie of its time. This was made in the middle 60s. It is an incredibly confronting and disturbing movie. Unlike anything I've seen, I think, from the era. If anything, this movie does serve as an interesting oddity of a period where American filmmakers were trying to push the boundaries of what they could kind of get away with in cinema, and it certainly shows in this movie. I really didn't like this at all. Not only is it just a really intense film to watch, I just didn't think the story was that great. I thought the acting was completely over the top. Olivia de Havilland delivers probably the worst performance of her career. It's melodramatic, it's soapy, it's just insanely over the top. I don't know what she was doing in this movie. And everything about it is just so annoying. The music is annoying. There are these really annoying sound effects going off, bells, alarms, everything. It's supposed to create this really kind of claustrophobic, intense sort of atmosphere, I think, that's supposed to make you kind of just be sitting there a little bit, you know, on the edge of your seat, just kind of, you know, it intensifies and you kind of just lose it as the character in the movie loses it. In that respect, I think the movie does what it sets out to do, and that is to disturb the viewer and to confront the viewer. But for me, this is just not a movie I really liked. Yes, it works, but it's not a movie that I thought was any good. I actually thought it was dreadful. That said, the presentation that has been delivered by Imprint on this release right here is wonderful. Beautiful looking movie. The black and white cinematography is fantastic. It pulls up very sharply on high definition. Special features on here are great as well. It's just not a movie that I personally could recommend. Next up is 1974's The Parallax View, starring Warren Beatty and directed by Alan J. Pakula. A drama about one man's paranoia that turns out to be a total incredible fact ranks amongst the best political thrillers. Warren Beatty is a news reporter who, along with 7 others, witnesses the assassination of a political candidate. When the other 7 die in accidents, the newsman begins to doubt the official position that a lone madman was responsible for the crime. He imagines a sophisticated work of highly trained murderers, but his nightmares pale against the bizarre truth he uncovers. The Parallax View, which has been released internationally on Blu-ray, is absolutely loaded with brand new special features, including 2 new audio commentaries and 3 new video essays by Kim Newman, Matthew Sweet, and Chris O'Neill. It also comes with a theatrical trailer. I'm not a huge fan of movies from the 1970s. This one was, of course, made in the middle 70s. There's something about the movies of the period that I just really can't get into. Maybe it's the kind of political landscape of the time that just crept into every single one of the movies. A lot of the movies from the 70s just are dull, droll, drab, and really kind of uninteresting. For me, I think Parallax View could be like the most political of all the films from the era that I have seen anyway. This is a beloved movie that a lot of people really, really love. It's one of Warren Beatty's most well-known, beloved films. Again, I'm not really a huge fan of Warren Beatty either. I'm not too sure why. There's just something about his movies that I've never really been able to get into. I think this was a really decent conspiracy thriller, and I really do understand why people love this one. It's slow boiling. It is fairly unpredictable in parts. You don't really know where it's going to go. But for me, maybe it was just a little bit too slow. Maybe it was just a little bit too boring. And the message that it tried to make, I just feel like I'd seen it over and over and over again. That said, the transfer on this is stunning. Again, it comes from a brand new 4K transfer. I'm not sure if this is the exact same transfer that was used on the Criterion edition that came out maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but the transfer here is stunning. If you're a fan of this movie, I think this is definitely an edition that you do want to get your hands on, but unfortunately for me, this is one that I just really didn't love. Next up is the 1950s Outrage, starring Marla Powers and Todd Andrews, and directed by Ida Lupino. This is a worldwide debut of the film on Blu-ray. A young woman who has just become engaged has her life completely shattered after she is sexually assaulted while on her way home from work. This release sports a brand new 2K scan from the original negative by Paramount Pictures and is complemented by a brand new audio commentary by film critic Alexandra Helen-Nichols. Okay, so talking about confronting movies is this one right here, Outrage. It's a movie I'd never heard of. In fact, when you type in Outrage on IMDb, it comes up about 10th down the line. So I think this is a fairly unknown movie. As the synopsis does note, this is a postcode Hollywood movie, which means this is a movie that is made in the period where Hollywood was taking their censorship maybe a little bit more seriously than they did, perhaps the 20s and the 30s. It was a free-for-all back then. You could get away with anything. Then they introduced this code and it became kind of harder for filmmakers and studios to make movies that were on more taboo subjects, more confronting subjects. Now, Outrage does deal with these themes of sexual abuse. There is some pretty confronting scenes in here, particularly for a movie from 1950. I mean, we're talking about a fairly early Hollywood film that is focusing on some incredibly devastating and confronting themes. I have never seen a movie from this era or any earlier that deals with it in this way. I think it's actually a really wonderful movie because not only because it was pushing boundaries, it was touching subjects that were never touched on in Hollywood at the time, certainly more so more recently. I feel like this is a movie that is certainly really ahead of its time. That said, this movie certainly isn't an easy watch by any means, but I just really love the audacity of this piece. This was actually rated X when it was first released. I mean, there was a different certification system back then, but X is kind of the highest you could go back then. This is a movie that I feel like probably didn't get a wide release, probably wasn't seen by a lot of people at the time, and probably hasn't been seen by a lot of people over time either. And I really love that Imprint has been able to get this back out onto the market for film lovers to kind of appreciate. This is a really nice piece of film history. It's also a film noir. You know, I love film noirs. I think this is one of the darkest, kind of seediest film noirs I've ever seen. The transfer on this one is absolutely stunning as well. It's gorgeously filmic. The black and white film noir low-key cinematography is stunning. It looks great. This is a release that I can highly recommend. Next up is 1954's The Naked Jungle, starring Eleanor Parker and Charlton Heston, and directed by Byron Haskin. This is a worldwide debut of The Naked Jungle on Blu-ray. Charlton Heston is the powerful, brooding owner of a plantation in the wild and treacherous South American jungle. Eleanor Parker is his charming American mail-order bride. They're both threatened by the advance of billions of relentless killer ants who are making their way across the jungle, cutting a path of creeping horror which is 20 miles long and 2 miles wide. This edition comes with 2 brand new audio commentaries by film critics Barry Forshaw and Kim Newman and film historians Lee Pfeiffer and Paul Scrabo. It also comes with a legacy audio commentary by George Pell biographer Justin Humphreys and author film historian C. Courtney Joyner. Additionally, the disc features the documentary Charlton Heston for All Seasons and various radio adaptations of the film. Naked Jungle is a bit of an odd movie. This begins as this sort of over-the-top, melodramatic, soapy kind of love film where this woman moves to a plantation for an arranged marriage with this guy who just is like an absolute baron over the land, an absolute douche. His views are completely culturally, politically outdated, and as a result, the movie is really quite outdated as well. This is a movie that I really, again, could not gel with. The further the movie goes along, it becomes more of this weird kind of over-the-top sort of action adventure flick where they have to save the plantation from these killer ants. It just completely spirals out of control, and it's an absolute dog of a movie. I once attended a live Q&A session with director Tim Burton in Melbourne, where for some reason he was talking about Charlton Heston. I think he must have been talking about his Planet of the Apes movie, and he described Charlton Heston as the world's best worst actor. That has not been on display ever any more than it has been right here. His performance here is absolutely awful, but I think that's part of the allure of Charlton Heston as well. Everyone knows that he's bad, but he's so bad that he's good. Alan Parker is fantastic in this movie as well. This doesn't have the best transfer that Imprint have ever put out. It's certainly not as good as most of the ones that have been released here in this wave, but it's okay. I don't believe it's a new transfer. I believe it's quite dated. Again, it's just simply Imprint notes this is a 1080p high definition presentation. That tells me this is probably an older transfer that's been sitting around for some time. It looks nice, but there are, you know, instances of wear and tear. The colors aren't that great or whatever. This is not a fantastic movie. It's not one that I would highly recommend. If you're a fan of Charlton Heston movies, or if you're a fan of Alan Parker, it's definitely one worth checking out. But again, just keep in mind it's a bit boring, it's a bit tedious, and it is really culturally outdated for multiple reasons. Next up is 1954's The Country Girl, starring Bing Crosby, Grace Kelly, and William Holden, and directed by George Seaton. This is a worldwide debut of the film on Blu-ray. This adaptation of Clifford Odets' stage drama features Bing Crosby as the hard-drinking Frank Elgin, a once popular Broadway star whose glory days have passed. When director Bernie Dodd gives Elgin a role in his new musical, he must also deal with the actor's sour and ever-present wife, Georgie, who Dodd believes is the cause of her husband's failure. This edition features a brand new audio commentary by professor and film scholar Jason A. Ney, and a documentary, Grace Kelly, the American Princess, as well as a theatrical trailer. Alright, so this is absolutely more my style. A 1950s film with Bing Crosby, Grace Kelly, who deservedly won an Oscar for this role, and William Holden. This movie is so beautiful. It's a really great, high drama romance movie, whirlwind romance, love triangle film between all these, but I just love this kind of thing. You know, I'm a sucker for my romantic movies, and this is just kind of one of the pinnacles of the films from this era. It really is astounding. It's the first time I've got a chance to check it out, and I'm so happy that I did, because all the performances in this movie are terrific. I love Bing Crosby. I think this is probably one of my favorite performances of his I've ever seen. And again, Grace Kelly is wonderful. Definitely deserved the Oscar. I know there's still debate about that all these years later, but she definitely did deserve an Oscar for her role in this movie, because she's just so great. But it is kind of dark and depressing as well. It hits on these really kind of heavy themes like alcoholism and depression, things like that. Again, things that you didn't often see touched on at the time, but they're kind of at the forefront here. You're starting to see filmmakers push the boundary of what kind of stories they can tell, real mature kind of adult stories, and this is one of them. I just think this is just, it's filmed beautifully, it's directed beautifully, it has a stunning script, and I would highly recommend this film right here. The transfer on this is great as well. Again, this one just simply says that it comes from a 1080p high definition presentation. I believe that probably means this is an older transfer of the movie, but it looked fine to me. It's beautifully filmic, the colors are really nice. There are occasional kind of film element details. You've got scratches and hairs and kind of film detriments every now and then, but it's not glaring. It doesn't ruin the entire film. It's just kind of every now and then. I think it could do with a brand new transfer, and I just kind of wish it had been done here, but I don't really have too many issues on how it has been delivered to us right here. Next up is 1968's House of Cards, starring George Peppard, Inga Stevens, and Orson Welles. This is the debut of House of Cards on Blu-ray anywhere in the world. In 1960s Paris, an American boxer stumbles upon an international fascist conspiracy that aims to create a new world order. This release comes with a new audio commentary by film historian Scott Harrison and also features a theatrical trailer, an isolated music and effects audio track, and a photo gallery. It really is quite surprising, maybe not so surprising, to discover how many quasi-Hitchcockian thrillers there were in the 1960s, 1970s. Hitchcock, of course, had so much success in movies like Rear Window and Vertigo, Rope, you know, these real kind of thrilling movies with kind of a hard-boiled core to them. And every filmmaker out there wanted to emulate what Hitchcock was doing. House of Cards, I think, is probably one of the best examples of a late 60s film that is quite clearly built in a Hitchcock mold. Of course, it doesn't get anywhere near the brilliance of an actual Hitchcock film. This one is pretty campy, it's very over the top, but it's one that's actually really quite enjoyable. George Papard, he was never the best of actors. He's someone who delivers what I'd like to call a cardboard box performance. He's just kind of really straight-faced and kind of really monotone and quite boring half the time, but there's kind of a charm in his work. I think he's a lot of fun. And this movie is just this really great little Euro romp where George Papard is kind of running around Europe, Paris, Italy, etc., and just trying to run away from these people who are after him and trying to, you know, take him down or whatever. It's one of those kinds of movies, and I had a lot of fun with this. I don't think at any moment this movie takes itself seriously. It's not a parody, it's not a spoof. It does try to be like a real thriller, but it doesn't. It does it in fun. It takes fun in this really kind of global Trek spy thriller kind of thing, and I really enjoyed this. I also really loved the location photography of this. The last half of the movie shifts to Italy, and there's some gorgeous filming here. Some of the best shots I've ever seen in Italy, particularly from a movie of the time. They travel to the Forum, to the Colosseum. You see the Colosseum shot from angles you don't usually see. They go inside the Colosseum. There's a whole sequence inside there that is filmed just beautifully. Again, little angles, little locations that you don't often see in these movies. They go to the Trevi Fountain. Not the best movie ever made, but I think it's a lot of fun. Again, I believe this is an older master that has been used here, but it looks perfectly fine to me. A little bit of print damage in some instances, but it's quite nice, it's crisp, it's filmic, the colors are really beautiful on this too. This movie is actually a bit of an oddity. It's one that has been almost impossible to track down on any format for years. Not too sure why. It's a movie I don't think did very well at the box office. I think it received a very, very limited run and kind of faded into obscurity and just never really picked up. I think it would have had VHS releases. There was maybe a very early DVD release. It kind of just disappeared. So Imprint is doing the Lord's work in getting this really well-hidden obscurity back out into the market right here. This is going to be a very popular seller, I think, because it's a movie that a lot of people have been wanting to get for a very, very long time. I had a lot of fun with it. I think I could recommend this one. Next up is 1964's Kitten with a Whip, starring Anne Margaret and John Forsythe, and directed by Douglas Hayes. Kitten with a Whip was recently released on Blu-ray in the United States by Universal. Jodie Drew is a sweet, sexy psycho babe on the run from the law. She's escaped from a detention centre, stabbed a guard and burned the place to the ground. David Patton doesn't know all this. He's just a senatorial candidate trying to do all the right things. However, Jodie makes sure that all the wrong things happen. This new edition comes with a brand new audio commentary by film critics Alexandra Helen-Nicholas and Josh Nelson, and two brand new video essays, one on the rise of delinquent girls in film, and one dissecting Kitten with a Whip. It also features a photo gallery. Alright, so this one was a whole lot of fun as well. This is just a really trashy, sort of melodramatic film noir from the 1960s. I love Anne Margaret. I think she is terrific. She delivered some really fantastic performances around this era. Of course, she was in Viva Las Vegas with Elvis, which is one of my favorite Elvis films. And there is no exception right here. I think Kitten with a Whip could be her best performance ever. It is so over the top. It's melodramatic, but it's fun. And she delivers this really manic, mesmerizing performance that has to be seen to be believed. If you're a fan of Anne Margaret, this is definitely a movie that you do want to see. If you're a fan of these kind of psychotic thrillers from the 1960s, it's also definitely one you want to see. It's filmed in this gorgeous black and white cinematography, and again, I believe that this is probably an older master here. It's probably the same one that was used on the Universal Blu-ray a couple of years ago, but it looks stunning. I love this. I thought it was so fun. Yes, it's very trashy, but it is an enjoyable romp, and I could highly, highly recommend it. And finally from Imprint is 1959's Last Train from Gun Hill, starring Kirk Douglas, Anthony Quinn and Carolyn Jones, and directed by John Sturgis. Last Train from Gun Hill was recently released in the United States on Blu-ray under the Paramount Presents label. Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn headline this suspenseful western, which follows US Marshal Matt Morgan on the trail of his wife's killer. Adding a dark twist to the tale, the suspect's father is Morgan's longtime friend, cattle baron Craig Belden. Morgan is determined to capture the killer and take him away by the 9 o'clock train against all odds. This edition doesn't include any exclusive bonus features, but does include an audio commentary by film historian Stephen Price and a filmmaker focus by Leonard Moulton on the film, as well as a theatrical trailer. Alright, you know I love my westerns, I love my Kirk Douglas films, and I've really come to love Anthony Quinn movies recently too. I think Umbrella put out a couple of movies with Anthony Quinn in it recently, and I just think he's so great. A really fantastic, underrated actor from the era. This is a great western, and it's shot as if it were a film noir. This edition doesn't include any exclusive bonus features, but does include an audio commentary by film historian Stephen Price and a filmmaker focus by Leonard Moulton on the film, as well as a theatrical trailer. Alright, you know I love my westerns, I love my Kirk Douglas films, and I've really come to love Anthony Quinn movies recently too. I think Umbrella put out a couple of movies with Anthony Quinn in it recently, and I just think he's so great. A really fantastic, underrated actor from the era. This is a great western, and it's shot as if it were a film noir. Stunning cinematography in here, and it's just one of the best looking westerns from the era, and one of the most kind of, I think, thrilling and gripping westerns of the time as well. I think I would probably put this up as one of my favorite westerns of all time, and that's saying a lot because I love the genre and I love so many movies from the genre. This is one of my favorites that I've ever experienced. Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn both deliver absolutely powerhouse performances here, and it's definitely a sight to behold. The transfer of this is stellar as well. This, I believe, would be the same transfer that has been used on the recent Paramount Presents release of the film, which was sometime last year. The imprint listing says it's a 1080p high-definition presentation from a 6K film transfer of the original VistaVision negative. I don't know how new this transfer is, where I believe it was probably done for the Paramount Presents line, or it could have been an older master that has only just been released. I'm not too sure, but it looks great, and I really didn't have any issues with this. Film grain levels are fantastic, really crisp, really smooth. I loved how this one looked. Get out and check this one out. Alright, so that is it for the imprint titles we'll be spotlighting in this video. Let's take a look at the new releases from Umbrella Entertainment. First up is the latest addition in Umbrella's World Cinema range, 1998's Run Lola Run, starring Frank Batente and directed by Tom Tykwer. Two-bit criminal Manny delivers some smuggled loot for his boss Ronnie, but accidentally leaves the 100,000 mark payment in a subway car. Given 20 minutes to come up with the money, he calls his girlfriend Lola, who sprints through the streets of the city to try to beg the money out of her bank manager's father and get to Manny before he does something desperate. Run Lola Run is an absolutely terrific experimental film from Germany from the late 1990s. It's a movie I've seen a couple of times previously, and it's great to get this in the World Cinema line here from Umbrella. It has been released on Blu-ray in Australia previously, so this is a reissue of the film. I believe it uses the same master, which is great. I don't think it really needs a new updated master for the particular kind of movie. I really love this one. This is such a, as I said, it's an experimental film, and it's this movie that tells this story 3 times over, but each time it tells it, the ending is different. So it's kind of 3 alternate takes on the events. This is something we've seen a lot in Hollywood over the years, but this kind of is the first movie where this was really tried kind of on a mainstream level. I think it's great. Franka Potente is fantastic in this movie. It's probably one of my favorite German films, and if you are interested in this, if you think this sounds interesting, definitely one worth taking a look. If you're getting into your world cinema, I think this is one that you definitely have to see. It's fantastic, highly recommended. Next up is the latest addition in the Beyond Genres line, 1996's Crash. After getting into a serious car accident, a TV director discovers an underground subculture of scarred, omnisexual car crash victims who use car accidents and the raw sexual energy they produce to try to rejuvenate his sex life with his wife. Crash is about the strange lure of the auto collision, provoking as it does the human fascination with death and the tendency to eroticize danger. Alright, so like many of the Beyond Genres installments, this is not a movie that particularly grabs me. I'm not a huge fan of genre films, but I'm always happy to give them a go. And check out this weird kind of subculture of cinema, I suppose, if you can put it that way. Crash is, again, an incredibly confronting movie. It's perhaps one of the most confronting movies ever made. It's weird, it's warped, it's twisted. It is beautifully filmed. There is a fantastic, you know, filmic nature to this movie. The performers are all terrific in this too. But it is a movie that is just maybe a little bit too weird and a little bit too out there for me. Crash has been released on Blu-ray before, so the transfer that you're seeing right here is one that has been presented on a previous issue of this. This is just a reissue of the movie. It has a few new bonus features on here, mostly interviews with kind of core crew members of the film, artists, creatives who are aboard the movie. Again, if you love your genre films, this is definitely one I think you do want to pick up. I think it's a worthy inclusion in the Beyond Genres range, but again, it's just not a movie that is particularly for me. Next up is the inaugural film in Umbrella's brand new Films of Fury line, which aims to release a bunch of martial arts classics to the Australian market. The first title in this line is 1971's The Big Boss, starring Bruce Lee. Cheng Chao An, a Chinese young man, works in an ice factory in Bangkok. The factory owner is known as a prominent figure in overseas Chinese society, but in secret he is an underground boss operating a huge chain of vice dens. One day, several workers run into their boss's secret deeds and are never seen again. Cheng sets out to investigate, and his evil deeds eventually come to light. Alright, finally, I get some Bruce Lee into my collection. I've wanted to get Bruce Lee movies in my collection for a long time. I know Beyond Entertainment released a Bruce Lee box set a number of years ago, which I unfortunately missed. For some reason, I just never got around to picking that one up. Went out of print. Umbrella obviously has the rights to all these Bruce Lee movies now, and they're reissuing them all in this Films of Fury line. So for the next few months, we're going to be getting Bruce Lee films coming out under this line, which is really cool. I did quite enjoy this. I'm not a huge fan of martial arts, but I really am trying to get into more martial arts cinema because I do love the choreography, the cinematography that are thrown into these movies. It's not a movie that I loved. It's kind of old style, it's very dated, and it's not great. The performances in here are really quite bad, and the choreography is not great either. You know, you got people punching each other, you know, their fist goes a mile away and their head goes flying back. So this is one of those martial arts movies that you imagine when you think of those really bad old English dubs they used to do over the top where the voice doesn't match up with any of the dialogue. Thankfully, thanks to releases like this, we can actually experience these movies in their original language, which is great. That's how I watch this. Original language with subtitles. It removes a little bit of that cheese from the movie. You can appreciate it for the film that it is, but it is so over the top, it is so highly stylized, and it is so kind of so cheaply and poorly made that it does have a bit of a charm to it, but it's not something that I really loved. I thought Bruce Lee was fantastic in this though, and I'm really looking forward to checking out some more Bruce Lee films. I believe the transfer used here is probably the exact same one that was used on the old Beyond Home Entertainment release. It's not great. The colours are very muted, there's a lot of print damage, it's not very sharp, it's kind of a little bit murky in some parts, but I think that a lot of that, it probably does go back to the inherent issues with the film that this was shot on. Would have been a very low budget movie, using very low budget film stock, and I think this has probably pulled up looking the best it probably ever will. If you're a fan of these kinds of movies, definitely recommend this release. Next up is the Icons of the Silver Screen double feature, Volume 1. This one features 1955's Picnic, starring William Holden and Kim Novak, and directed by Joshua Logan. And 1955's There's Always Tomorrow, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray, and directed by Douglas Sirk. In Picnic, emotions are ignited amongst the complacent townsfolk when a handsome drifter arrives in a small Kansas community on the morning of the Labor Day picnic. And in There's Always Tomorrow, when a toy manufacturer feels ignored and unappreciated by his wife and children, he begins to rekindle a past love when a former employee comes back into his life. Again, absolutely love Umbrella's double features. These are a really great and affordable way to build your collection of classic films. Pretty much all the movies that have been coming out of these double features are classic movies. Most of these movies are fairly short in length, and you can literally sit there and watch it as a double feature. They're both presented on the exact same disc. I really like both of the movies included here. These two are two kind of very, very dramatic, kind of melodramatic films. Picnic was not one that I really loved. I think it was maybe just a little too melodramatic for me. Again, I'm not a huge fan of these films that are based on theatrical plays that are then reproduced as if they were a theatrical play. They're like very kind of theatrical, very stagey. I'm not huge on those kinds of movies. Don't know why, it's just something that has never really been for me, but it is a really beautiful movie. It's got some great performances in there, but I didn't love the movie. There's Always Tomorrow, however, I really liked. Fred MacMurray is fantastic in just about everything he does. It's really nice to see him in kind of a more dramatic role as well. He did a few dramatic performance roles, but not a lot. He was more predominantly known for his comedy films and his sitcom work, but Fred MacMurray is a fantastic actor who really delivers on the dramatic front when he gets a chance to play around with it. And of course, Barbara Stanwyck is great too. The chemistry between Stanwyck and MacMurray is great in this movie, and I think it's definitely, if you're a fan of romance films from the era, this is one definitely worth checking out. It's less melodramatic than Picnic, but it is a little bit melodramatic as well, but just kind of just the right amount for me. I definitely recommend this double feature. We also have the third volume of the retro sci-fi double feature range, including 1957's The Land Unknown, directed by Virgil W. Vogel, and 1956's The Mole People, directed by Laszlo Gorog. In The Land Unknown, a Navy scientist, a newswoman, and a helicopter pilot find dinosaurs and humidity at the South Pole. In The Mole People, a party of archaeologists discover the remnants of a mutant 5 millennia old Sumerian civilization lying beneath a glacier atop a mountain in Mesopotamia. Alright, we know what to expect from these movies now. Schlocky B-movie sci-fis from the 1950s. They're big, they're bad, they're absolutely crap, but they're so much damn fun. I love these movies. You know, the movies that use this awful stop motion animation for like dinosaurs and creatures and monsters and stuff. People in really awful like bodysuits, dressed as mutants, you know, walking around like this, mole people, whatever, just really crap. You can tell that they're in like a latex suit. I just love these movies. There's so much charm to them, and these were so fun. I really love The Land of the Unknown. There is some actually really great camera trickery going on in this film. I think some of it's really great. A lot of the matte paintings and stuff, and a lot of the sets and stuff built for this were stunning, particularly for a low-budget film. I believe they actually wanted to film this one in colour, but they ran out of budget. They had to film it in black and white. It's filmed in CinemaScope, so it has a really large kind of scope to it. And it's just fun. It's fun. I really loved it. Mole People I didn't love as much. It's really weird. It goes off in this really kind of quirky tangent that you don't expect, where it's these kind of ancient civilization who kind of look like Egyptians, and it's just very strange, but it is enjoyable as well. I love these retro sci-fi double features that Umbrella has been pushing out there. More! Give me more! And I know they are in coming months. I can't wait. I'm so excited. But definitely pick this one up. It's so much fun. Next up, we have a new installment in the Sunburn Screens line, 1996's Cosy, starring Toni Collette, Ben Mendelsohn, Barry Otto, and Rachel Griffiths. It's directed by Mark Joff. Ben Mendelsohn stars as Lewis Riley, an unemployed young man who applies for a job as a director, drama teacher at a mental hospital. He lands the job and finds himself directing a production of the Mozart opera Così fan tutte, an elaborate, demanding piece of theatre and opera in Italian. And it is going to be performed by a cast that he must select from among the patients who only speak English. Cosy is a mid-90s Australian film which I'd never heard of until Umbrella put it out right here. I'm not too sure why. I think this is one that has just never, I guess, picked up an audience. I think it's more of a cult thing. Again, never heard of it. Very strange because of the stellar cast that is involved here. You know, I love Ben Mendelsohn. He's probably my favourite Australian actor, or at least one of my favourite Australian actors. And he's great in this movie. This movie is cute. It's charming. It's got a really beautiful soul and a really beautiful heart to it. But it is a little bit outdated. Its representation of these patients that are living in this facility is really quite outdated. We're talking this is only like a 30-year-old movie, and it just goes to show even then movies like this were being made. This is certainly something that probably couldn't be made today. It does make a lot of light out of things that are not particularly funny. It does kind of take the mickey out of a lot of these characters, and it does make a joke out of kind of mental illness in some respects. Again, it's one of those films that I feel like you have to look at, you have to view through an eyeglass of the time, because it does really have a beautiful soul and a really beautiful heart, but it's just, it's really quite outdated by today's standards. It's a decent movie, and if you can go in there with kind of a more open mind, I think you'll find something to enjoy about it. But again, just I think some people might be offended by some of the subject matter in here and how it is handled. This is a really great transfer of this movie, though. I'm not sure if it is a brand new transfer or anything, but it's the first time it has been released on Blu-ray, and it really looks quite nice for a film of its time. Next up, we have another Sunburn Screens release, 1981's Puberty Blues, directed by Bruce Beresford. Puberty Blues traces the lives of two adolescent females who have spent the first part of their lives in a group by themselves, while desperately trying to break into the in crowd who dominate the Green Hill Beach. Once they are accepted into the group, they realise that the group's laid-back, ultra-cool facade is just that, a glossy follow-up. So Puberty Blues is probably one of the best known Australian films of all time. It's got a tremendous cult following. It's considered one of the most beloved Australian films of all time. It's not one that I had ever watched in full until now. Or if I had watched it in full, I don't really remember that much about it. I do remember watching it in media class at school. Again, I can't remember if we watched the whole thing. So I've been dying to kind of check this one out finally in full, in one sitting, and just checking out, again, what is one of the most beloved Australian films. It's not one that really worked for me. I feel like this is an incredibly dated movie. It's about 40 years old now, and it really feels it. It really feels its age. A very early 80s coming-of-age teen drama, filmed in Australia. The performances aren't great, the story isn't really that great, and it's just not anything that's incredibly relevant today. I feel like its depiction of youth was probably kind of gritty and kind of real at the time, but I feel like so much has changed in this time period that it is not something that particularly holds up that well. I do understand why it would have been big at the time. There wouldn't have been much, there particularly wasn't anything like this on the Australian market. At the time, there's a lot of movies coming out from America that were kind of similar to this in the time period, but this is the only thing from Australia when you talk about these kind of coming-of-age dramas like this, at this kind of more confronting nature. However, it is definitely a worthy installment in the Sunburn Screens line. This has been released on Blu-ray in the past from Umbrella. I believe that this new reissue just uses the exact same port from the previous release. Next up is the Australian Blu-ray debut of 2005's Pride and Prejudice, starring Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen. It's directed by Joe Wright. Based on the beloved masterpiece by Jane Austen, when Elizabeth Bennet meets the handsome Mr. Darcy, she believes he is the last man on earth she could ever marry. But as their lives become intertwined in an unexpected adventure, she finds herself captivated by the very person she swore to loathe for all eternity. Again, this is the Blu-ray debut of Pride and Prejudice in Australia. It's been available on international markets for about 12 years now, maybe even longer than that. So this is the first time I'm actually getting a chance to check this one out. It's one I've always wanted to see. I really, really love Joe Wright's films. I think Keira Knightley is fantastic. She's one of my favourite actresses. She's done some really, really great movies. And this is just one that I've always been interested in. I'm not usually a huge fan in these kind of literary adaptations, particularly the high romance kind of adventure, melodramatic kind of thing. I'm not huge on it, but this one really worked for me. I thought this is one of the most gorgeous literary adaptations I've ever seen. Cinematography is stunning, the performances are intoxicating, the music is just so ethereal. I loved absolutely everything about this film, and I'm so glad that I finally got a chance to watch it, and I'm so glad that it worked for me so well. The transfer on this is great. I believe it's probably the exact same transfer that Universal would have used on their very first Blu-ray issue of this movie back in like 2010 or whatever it was. So it is slightly dated, but again, for a film that is fairly contemporary, it looks great, and it holds up very well. These movies from this era don't need remasters just yet. But I think it does look really good, and it is just, I love this movie. I couldn't recommend it anymore. Go out and check it out. We also have the Australian Blu-ray debut of 2002's Gangs of New York, which stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, Daniel Day-Lewis, and John C. Reilly, and is directed by Martin Scorsese. Amsterdam Vallen is a young Irish immigrant released from prison. He returns to the 5 Points, seeking revenge against his father's killer, William Cutting, a powerful anti-immigrant gang leader. He knows that revenge can only be attained by infiltrating Cutting's inner circle. Amsterdam's journey becomes a fight for personal survival and to find a place for the Irish people in 1860s New York. Again, an absolutely terrific film. Gangs of New York is one of Martin Scorsese's absolute masterpieces. It is big, it's long, it's epic, it is dramatic, it's absolutely brutal. I mean, watching it back now, it's not as brutal as I do remember. I mean, I was a kid at the time, but I do remember so much talk about how violent this movie is, how violent this movie was when it first came out. It's rated only MA, but it's rated that for high-level violence. It is still a very confronting film, but I feel like we've seen a lot worse in more recent years. Look, this is a great movie. How much more can be said about this? The performances in this are absolutely stellar. Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz deliver some of their greatest performances ever. I think this is probably my favourite Daniel Day-Lewis performance. It's very stiff competition, but I really think it is. And this is one of Martin Scorsese's greatest films. I'm so happy it is finally available on Blu-ray. This looks great. I believe, from what I understand, I've been reading that the transfer that Umbrella used on this is an older transfer, and there's a newer one that the movie's been reissued a couple of times on Blu-ray in the States and in the UK, and there is a newer master that has been reissued on a newer release of it, and instead Umbrella was given the older transfer. I'm not sure. I'm sure the new one probably does look marginally better, but I thought this was fine. This looked good for me, and I'm just happy to experience this movie on Blu-ray. And if you want to own this without importing it, this is a decent way to go. And finally, from Umbrella, we have the DVD release of the 2001 TV series Fires. Fires is a 6-part serialized anthology series inspired by the stories of the people who survived the catastrophic fire season in Australia and continue to endure the aftermath. Each episode is based around character studies of ordinary people caught in the unimaginable and the impossible choices they were forced to make. This series captures the scale of the disaster by following the path of the fires, travelling from north to south of Australia to September through February. In each episode, viewers will see the conflagration grow, consuming lives, homes and farmland, while destroying communities, bushland and more than 1 billion native animals. Alright, so this is a really fantastic series. It's harrowing, it's confronting. It is based, I believe, on the 2019-2020 bushfires that we had in Australia. Very catastrophic fires. Back in 2009, when we had the Black Friday bushfires, we were not too far off from them, and we were in the path of the fires. Within days, we could have been hit by them if the wind hadn't changed at the last minute. It's a very distressing thing to be involved in that situation, not quite knowing if you need to leave your house or go. I knew people who were directly affected. I knew people who lost homes and people who lost loved ones. And it's a very harrowing thing. Again, this is not based on those Black Friday bushfires, or the Black Saturday bushfires, sorry. It's based on the ones that happened a few years ago, but it's very similar. It's a very similar situation, and it's a hard thing to watch. And it still is very distressing every time you hear about these catastrophic bushfires that just take over the country. There is a content warning on this, actually. This series features images and dramatic reconstructions of the 2019-2020 Black Summer bushfires, which may distress some viewers. It is a confronting and kind of distressing series. I haven't watched all of it. I will get around to it eventually, but you know, filmmaking sense, it's great. Performances in here are really wonderful too. I will get around to watching this, but it's just, I think it will take some time. These are subjects which are still fairly tender for a lot of people who have experienced or have known people or have been involved in some way in events like this. Great series, I think, from what I have seen of it. Really fantastic performances in there. Eliza Scanlon, such a wonderful new upcoming Australian actress. She delivers great performance in her part in this show. But yes, this is available on DVD right now. They said on ABC sometime last year, and it's great that it is on DVD. It's a great kind of little, I guess, historical piece to view and kind of get an idea of. I will get around to watching the whole thing one day, but yeah, I did want to spotlight this one on here because I think it is an important piece of Australian history. And at that though, that is it for this Blu-ray DVD collection update / haul video. That was everything from Imprint and Umbrella that was sent in to me. I believe these were December, January releases. I've just received the newest batch of stuff and I'll have videos for them next month. I'm working my way through all of them at the moment. But of course, next week, I will be uploading another Blu-ray DVD collection update video, which will cover stuff I've got sent in from Random Space Media and Kicks.com.au, as well as a bunch of stuff that I've personally picked up in a whole bunch of great JB Hi-Fi sales, DVDs, Blu-rays as low as like $1.50. I can't wait to show off what we picked up there. Thanks again to the incredible teams over at Umbrella and Via Vision Imprint for sending over stuff for the purposes of this video review right here. I really love working with you guys, so thanks so much for supporting myself and the channel. So much fun working with you. And thanks everybody out there for watching. The viewership on this new extra channel has been really great. I still do love doing these Blu-ray videos, even though they're on this new platform, and they will stay here. So thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.